Good to see everybody. My name is Anthony Child, Director of San Jose State University School of Information. Thank you for joining us and welcome to our celebration and recognition of Black History Month. Chat is on, so please take a moment to share and chat where you're joining us from. It gives me and the iSchool great pleasure to support equity, diversity, and inclusion in all of its beauty and power. And I want to thank our outstanding speakers and panelists for taking the time to join us today. The theme of today's symposium is Equity in Libraries 2023 and Beyond, Making a Successful Entry into the Profession. And this is part of our EDI Symposium series sponsored by the iSchool. All of our EDI Symposium recordings and transcripts and resources are available in our EDI iLibrary. And Alfredo, if you wouldn't mind, drop that in the chat. And also, please subscribe to our brand new EDI YouTube channel. Also, if we could drop that in the chat, you'll be notified every time a new symposium recording is posted, and this will be joining that in a week or so after. For today's session, if you have a question, please use the Q&A feature, and someone from our distinguished panel will answer it. Also, periodically, we'll make chat available for more interactive Q&A, especially near the end. Today's symposium was in part born on an unforgettable day for me spent with my friend and mentor, Wanda Brown, advocating for libraries on Capitol Hill during National Library Legislative Day. As a young professor, it was quite an honor to spend time with Wanda, who was then the current ALA president. She is kind, wise, and a true model of hard work, dedication, and commitment to her students, her patrons, and the field. One of the seminal points that we talked about was that it's not enough to just support EDI, but rather we must apply it in the field and provide the necessary support to nurture it. I never forgot those discussions as we walked the long halls of Congress, and I think we must have did 20,000 steps easy, and we met with members of the House and Senate. So it's a great honor, and with enthusiasm, I want to present to you Wanda Brown, past ALA president and director of library services at Winston-Salem State University, who will lead and moderate our symposium today. Welcome, Wanda.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Let me thank first all the panelists who are joining us, but I also want to thank I don't know how many of you are out there. I hear about 350 registered. I want to thank you for investing in yourselves, because that's key to what we're going to talk about today. I am extremely delighted to have Elaina Norlin to kick us off today. Everything we're talking about today is a way for you to make sure you are prepared to enter this profession. And if you're new to the profession, to just do maybe like a temperature check to make sure things that you are giving it your best. What I'd like to ask you to do today is, as each speaker speaks, take notes for yourself as to that temperature check. Is there more you can do to support diversity, equity, and inclusion? Is there, did a speaker give you something to think about, something you'd like to pursue further? So we welcome all of your thoughts, and we hope that you will get a lot from today that will encourage you, motivate you, and push you forward to take additional steps. So first, we're going to have Elaina talk to us this morning first. I keep saying morning, it's afternoon here, but it's morning there. So Elaina, I'm going to let you and all the other panelists as we go through today introduce themselves, okay? So I will turn it over to Elaina.
Hello, everybody. Let me get some. Hello. I'm Elaina Norlin. I am the iSchool Professional Development Coordinator, and I'm also someone who wrote a book about employee engagement and for people to have the best experience possible while they're at work. And I'm excited about this talk today because I'm the keynote. So I approach this as I want to give you guys things to think about, right? So this is a thinking half an hour for you. And like I always say, for anybody who's seen me talk before, if you have any questions or concerns afterwards, always feel free to reach out to me. I'm very open to talking and asking questions and stuff like that. So feel free to reach out. So the talk today is going to be about inclusive workplaces. It's the I in the DEI, EDI. It's that I. What does I mean? And where does it fit in that whole conversation? I've done a talk for this a lot of times, and I wanted to see if we wanted to do some polls, because a lot of people don't really know what I means for. What does inclusive mean? So these are some definitions I actually found online, and see which one of these actually resonates with you, if any of them resonate with you. You want to go to polls everywhere. You want to go Elaina Norlin, Norlin, 584-237-607. And then just put whatever you think. It would be, give me an idea of like where your thought is in terms of creating inclusive workplaces. So I'll give you guys a few seconds to think of it. For people who may or may not see it, A is, it means affirmative action at work. B, it's apologizing for white privilege. C, it is marginalized people are recognized for their accomplishments. D, workplace free of bullying and hostility. E, none of the above. F, all of the above. So let's see what you guys think. And like I said, all of these things I found literally online. Give it a few more seconds. Okay, we're gonna go on with this one. The answer is actually none of the above. It's none of the above. Let me give you what the traditional definition is. It's an inclusive workplace that's defined as a work environment that makes every, and you see that I specified, every employee feel valued, while also acknowledging their differences on how these differences contribute to the organization's culture and outcomes. The reason why this is important, part of the conversation is always how does we make everyone in the organization, no one is left behind in the organization when they feel valued, right? But the trick is when you look at inclusive workplaces is that part, the second part of it. And this is the second part is what we're going to talk about today. If you are providing an inclusive workplace, that means that the differences contribute to the organization's culture and outcomes. And I want to say that again, because this is what's hard. The differences contribute to the organizational culture and outcomes. And what that means is that if we're embracing everyone's unique talent, skills, and abilities, that means that somehow the organization will change a little bit. And a lot of times when I do my work in terms of organizational culture, the number one things that people tell me all the time is that the organization does not change. There's assimilation, status quo, reluctant to change, and all these other languages. So, but if we are going towards a 100% inclusive environment, the organization would be changing at all times. So keep that in mind. So this is a joke. I was laughing with my friends here. The secret to why inclusive is so elusive, right? And because when you do the research, when I was doing research about the best environments to work at ever, and I was talking to people who absolutely love working for their job, it really is a very small percentage of organizations around the world that feel that way. The current number, it's about 10 to 12% of all organizations, not just libraries, all over the world feel this way. So why is the numbers of this so small? Why is it so tiny? So what I have come up with just from visiting libraries, consultant work, things like that, is that number one, we have to acknowledge that the current state, and the current state in most of our organizations is that everyone is not being valued, respected for the talent, skills, and abilities they bring to the organization. That is not a true statement. So if we start with that as hey, the current state is that we have inequities within this, then we can work on it. But a lot of times we're not really even willing to acknowledge that that is going on within our environment. The second thing about inclusivity, it requires intentional action. You have to be aware of just what I said before, as whoever in your organization blossoms into the best version of themselves at work, the organization will change. And so in order for us to be able to make sure that everyone is moving in that direction, we have to be very intentional. It can't be very passive or it'll just work itself out. It doesn't work itself out. The top organizations that do really well in this are very, very intentional. Assimilation, status quo, comfort. That is usually the main reason why it's not inclusive. There is always something within the organization, I always say after the 6-month honeymoon period, that pushes us back to assimilation, status quo, and comfort in the way that we always have done things. That's that we've always done this way. We've tried that before, but we can't do that anymore. We need for you to do it our way. We need for you to do it the corporate way, the job way, the organization way. That's where that comes in. Another reason this is especially prevalent for libraries is conflict avoidance. A lot of times when we have differences, and the more that people come in who are different in all kinds of ways, you're going to have tension, you're going to have disagreements, you're going to have conflict. And so how can we navigate through what is going to always be normal? Conflict is normal, disagreements is normal, all of that's normal. How do we work through that? And if you don't remember anything that I say for this keynote, true inclusiveness will change or at least tweak the work culture. Will change or at least tweak the work culture. So I'm going to give an example. I want you to really think about this because this is something someone told me. This is a real life story. And I really want you to think about what I was saying before and how this relates to this case study. So afterwards, I'm going to ask for your thoughts. And so as I run through this study, I want you to think about how this place either provided an inclusive environment or did not provide an inclusive environment. So this was a public library. What I mean by changing demographics, it used to be a sort of an older community. The people had, sort of retired or left or something like that. A newer community had came into this public library. They were younger. They were new couples, new people. They didn't really have children yet. A lot of them were entrepreneurs. And sort of the people who used to come into the library to do business work were no longer there. And so the library, wanting to be inclusive, had sort of start working with a person in the community, a local person, who was a small business owner that worked part-time at the library. They encouraged him and got him the resources he needed to get a library degree, which he did. And once he got his library degree, they offered him a job as the new business librarian because he had business experience. It was great. Everybody patted him on the back for getting someone who was in the community, getting them through library school, and actually getting them a job. So in that whole kind of diversity, recruitment, and all that other stuff, it's a win-win, right? However, there was a culture clash. The business librarian did not know it was a culture clash, but behind the scenes, the people who had hired him were starting to feel more and more uncomfortable. So what it was happening is that before, when they had a sort of a different clientele, the business librarian would basically teach classes about the online resources, maybe bring in some outside business entities that would just give really basic business training. It was very, very formalized. It was sort of just a really formal, structured setting. And that's what the business librarian who had been there a long time did. That person retired. And this new person who came in was because they were a small business owner. They were not a traditional business person. They were more of an entrepreneur. believed in much more experimentation. They were much more collaborative. They brought this young community in because they were part of that community. And they were doing a lot of things that wasn't really the culture of that particular library. So people were talking about him behind his back about how uncomfortable all of this experimentation and new ideas in this rapid succession was coming in, and it was making them uncomfortable. The success metrics were there, so they couldn't fire the person because actually the work that he was doing was increasing the number of programs. They didn't have people using the resources, and now they do have people using the resources. And the attendance went up, circulation, they were checking out more resources and books. All the success matrix were high. So they couldn't say you're fired, right? However, what they did instead is during his performance evaluation for the first year, they gave him a lukewarm annual review. And they told him that they would give him a better review if he went back to more of a traditional model, that he would bring his people in and they wouldn't be as rowdy and excitable and experimental, but he would bring them in and do the traditional teaching of the classes and the teaching of the online resources, sort of take his modern approach into their structure. They said that if he was willing to do that, then he would get more money, he would get an incentive, but they wanted him to halt, a quick halt of the other experimentation that he was doing. So, what do you guys think? What are your thoughts and reactions? What do you think happened to the business librarian? What would you have done if you got that lukewarm performance review, but with a caveat that it would get better if you went back to a traditional model? You left for a library where he's thriving as a leader, Black male. What is other thought? They wanted the appearance of change without the actual change. They didn't have real expectations from the library. The person stopped trying. He left to be authentic elsewhere. You decide to fit into the business culture, asked to fit, went to another library. Very interesting. The community lost a great connection to the library when he left for another library, left the library profession. Actually, he did not. This is not an unusual case. He took the money and conformed, right? And he had a family. He was from the community. That was his area. They didn't tell him that he had to do it or else. They just provided incentives for him to conform. So he took the incentives and stayed there. And just like some of what you guys said, there's a lot of things to unpack here. But one of the things that some of you guys were exactly right. The library organization wanted change within a structured job description framework. So they felt like they were doing a good thing, and they were, right? They took someone from the community, they got them a library degree, they got them a job, and thought this would be great as the business person, but hadn't really thought through what that person who's different. They were always an entrepreneur. They were always out with the community. They didn't really, the library itself didn't really think about by hiring someone that the organization would change. And as soon as they saw the change, they panicked, and then they went towards let's horn this in. And the assimilation is this one was interesting, where there was consequences and rewards. A lot of times that doesn't happen. Sometimes that what happens is if it wasn't always success matrix, the person would have got a message saying either you conform or this will be your job, right? You didn't get conform or this will be your job, but it was conform and we will reward you. So that's an interesting thing, but it doesn't always add up to consequences and rewards. Sometimes it's consequences and consequences, right? But in this case, the assimilation was based on rewards. The guy now, I did talk to him, and he is disengaged. He's checked out. Some of you guys were right on and spot on about that. He was disengaged. And they are still continuously meeting and doing the experimental ideas, interesting enough, at a community center on the other side of town, right? So they're still innovating and creating, but the library is not benefiting from it. So he didn't stop his creative activities. His best version of himself is being given in a volunteer element somewhere else outside of the library sphere. So some of the people which you guys said that they are at a disadvantage because as he could have become a better version of himself at work, they would have really, really benefited from his expertise. So, like, what could have been done here? I get this a lot, like, well, what should have been done? What could have been done, right? And this is a time where there should have been a long-term goal conversation, right? And this is not for him to have initiated, but in some cases, I always tell people who want to manage up, let's manage up, to have that conversation. So the library itself wanted more people in the library. The technique that they were using to get more people in the library wasn't working, right? The technique that he was using to get people in the library was working. But ultimately, the goal was to get people in the library and using resources and stuff. His technique was different, but the goal was exactly where they wanted to be. So in that conversation where they were like, could you just do it the traditional way? It could have been, but the traditional way was not working. So let's have a conversation about where do we want to be? How the goal of where we want to be. And there was never any conversation about that. So they waited until the end, during the annual review, to have that conversation. But by then they had already, provided this other incentive. But in reality, this should have been sat down and talked about before as he was doing his work. Soon as there was an element of discomfort, then the person should have sat down with him and talked about it and see how they could come with a win-win. So maybe they're overwhelmed with how fast things were going, but there could be more of a sort of a, stance where we're moving more slowly, but we're still getting to the goal. But there needs to be a conversation. That's what I mean, that conflict avoidance. The question is always, how can we use differences to excel and grow as an organization? So by him becoming like everybody else did not benefit the organization at all. They lost in that element. So the question is always, how can we use differences to excel and grow? And then the other thing is, which is hard because I've been a manager before, you have to allow trust in experimentation. So some of the things that he was doing worked out and some of them did not. But that trust and experimentation is what comes to the innovation on the other side. So as managers, for the managers who are on here, allowing for that time to have the trust and experimentation is where the inclusivity comes in. Flexibility comes without, and control release. I always tell people when I do management training, is that it's so, one of the number one things they tell me, it's so hard to let go and to let go of the control. But I always say, if you allow yourself to do a control release, the benefits of the organization is 10 times as much. And I also recognize that you can't let go of the control right away. So having exercises where you allow for people to do, like I said, in this case, what they were overwhelmed with, I bet you, was that how fast the change happened. But to have it where we have a conversation is, this is how we're going to move so the organization change where everybody can catch up with it, is where they needed to be in order to make sure that the business librarian was really thriving and not disengaged as he is right now. So now that I have your attention, I know there's some new people here. I also wanted to talk about inclusivity in terms of you figuring out if you're a new person going to a new job or you're thinking about getting another job and you are like, I'm sick of this crappy job, I want to go to another job. This is the advice I give to a lot of people all the time, and I want to just take a few minutes out and show you how it works. That the new environment post-pandemic is not just looking at jobs and benefits and their benefit package. We're really looking at what it feels like, the employee experience. What does it feel like after to be in this job? After the 6-month honeymoon period, what is it going to be like? How am I going to feel working here? Right? What is my experience going to be like here? And I always say that when you're recruiting or interviewing for a job, it goes both ways. It is always both ways. Your life is going into whatever position. You spend more time at work than anywhere else. So I always encourage questions, and I always encourage for people to make decisions that adds to their health and their well-being and their work-life balance. So the things that I always would say is to look beyond pay and benefits, research what it would feel like to work at this new job. During the interview, ask questions. And here's the important part. Not only listen, but watch. The nonverbal cues will tell you a lot. The nonverbal cues will tell you quite a bit. Listen to your gut instincts. And even, I understand it. Sometimes you just need to get a job and a paycheck, and you just need to get out of there. I get it. Trust me. But you want to still have all of this information so you can go in with your eyes open. I always tell people the first job that I ever got when I got out of library school was at the University of Arizona. And I asked a lot of questions. And I remember one of the ladies, her name was Carrie Russell, because I never will forget her, pulled me aside. She wasn't on the search committee, but she pulled me aside and said, Elaina, this job here at the University of Arizona, it will have a high degree of chaos. If you are looking for structure, if you're looking for things to have a predictable path, you will be miserable here. If you take this job, understand the high degree of chaos. And I took the job, right? But when the chaos came, I already knew that it was happening. I didn't feel angry or feel disillusioned about it because I already knew that was the experience. And I felt that that was fine with me. I don't need a whole lot of structure. So I made that decision. And even though a lot of people who came to University of Arizona left because they couldn't deal with the chaos, the fact that she told me that and then I made that decision helped me during a lot of different times within the organization. So that doesn't mean to get the information and turn down the job, but sometimes you do. But always go in loaded down with the research and to make a more informed decision. So here's some things that I would suggest that you think about. And we could talk more about it later if you all wanted to contact me. Here's some things and questions that I would frame. How do they resolve disagreements and conflict? Are they more on a scarcity or abundance thing? Is it do more with less? Is it we don't have enough money? We don't have enough this. We don't have enough that. That kind of thing. Do you want to be in a situation where we're feeling, like we're always in a, do more, take on more, burnout vibe? find out what's going on with either it's a scarcity or it's more of an abundance, even if they have less resources, but they're like, we're working on it. We've got a plan, and people feel sort of like we are structuring our work to make sure that we are doing the work as most efficiently as we can, but we're allowing people to still feel whole and sane. That's more of an abundance mindset. Know the difference and be able to ask those questions. Creative thinking versus challenging status quo, right? Remember from Business Librarian, he's a creative thinker. They were status quo. Being able to ask that questions about it. Maybe then if he knew they were more status quo-y, by the time when he realized that he was deep in, he could have maybe came back and said, hey, how do you guys feel? Because they weren't talking to him. But knowing that before would have helped him out. Career progression, like how do you move around? It's not just getting a management position, but how can you move around in this job? Performance evaluation is always important. How do you talk to the person that you're directly reporting to more frequently? Is it a situation like Business Librarian where they just get the annual review and that's the first time they're talking? You want to know in that annual review process, how often are you developing a relationship so you're not blindsided at the end of the year? And are they retaining employees? Is it more of a, if somebody leaves, we'll just get another one? Or is it, we are figuring out ways to value and appreciate the talent and the skills and abilities that come in? Because we are worth it. Without employees, the organization is nothing. So how are they retaining employees? So finally, I want to bring it all together. Everybody knows me, I always have hundreds of stories. So I want to show you how I made a decision to turn down a job and what I went through. So I'll just explain to you the process, right? And trusting your instincts. I was recruited to come in to be a public library director. They flew me in and they gave me an extra day to sort of see the area, the neighborhood, whatever, before I met with the city manager and sort of the group. What I decided to do is to not just go to the library, but to go around to different community areas and ask questions about the library. And I was curious about just, not people who were in the library go, oh, I love the library, but I wanted to know, like if I went to the local Starbucks or if I went to, any kind of local group, do they have an opinion about the library? And what I found is that the Indigenous people who had worked there, who had lived in the community, had a very negative reaction about that library. And the libraries, it was multiple libraries, but they had a very negative reaction about it. And I had talked to multiple Indigenous people and they were like, you seem like a really nice person and we hope you get the job, but let me explain to you, if you get the job, we don't feel welcomed at the library. And that was important information for me to know. So the next day when I did the job interview, there was 10 questions, and 8 of the questions were about disciplining staff. It was about discipline. How do you discipline? It was phrased to me in 8 different ways, but all of it was about discipline. So the first question I had after all of that was over was, why did you guys ask me 8 questions about disciplining staff? Is there something going on that I don't know? And I watched. And the city management team turned beet red and they were clenching their fists back and forth like this. And they said it between clenched teeth. They were like, these are traditional management questions. Any director would get these kind of questions. And I pushed back. I said, no, not actually. There's hundreds of management related questions. You can pick for all kinds of questions. I said, but it's 8 out of 10. Why is it 8 out of 10? And they were furious with me, right? They were smiling, but they were furious because remember I said, watch the body language. Then I threw in, hey, when I was talking to the community, I ended up getting some comments from the Indigenous people. And I said, I'm not sure if you knew this, but I want to talk a little bit about this. And they said, the first thing they said to me is that the Indigenous people you probably talked to were drunk and they were probably homeless. But they weren't drunk and homeless. They were at Starbucks. What are you talking about, right? They're not drunk and homeless. But the fact that they told me that they were drunk and homeless gave me a lot of why those Indigenous people were not welcomed in the facility. And then you could tell that they had gotten so mad that I had asked that question. They couldn't, everything else I went to, they kept going back to, I can't believe you asked that question. So that meant that the person who was going to be supervising me didn't like for me to ask questions, I felt more of a bullying kind of vibe if I said anything that challenged. And I wouldn't be able to and I wasn't confrontational, I was just asking questions. And if they're already angry with me asking basic questions, what would my experience be like when I'm trying to make changes at that facility, right? So instantly I knew, yes, I might have been able to come in and make some changes, but it would have been through a lot of adversity. And if the branding of Indigenous people is that they're drunk and homeless, then it was going to be an uphill battle. So in that sense, I instantly made a decision that for my mental wealth and well-being, I withdrew my application. But if I would have just went with the money, the pay was fabulous, and the courting and whatever, and didn't ask those questions, I would have walked into something that would have caused me a lot of harm down the line. So I want to leave that with you, that yes, I could have then made a decision in that moment to say, hey, I think I'm going to stay and fight it. But then that's when you look at your emotional well-being, your emotional health. Where do you want to be? What is your experience will be like? And I decided at that moment that I did not want that. And even though the money was great and the benefit package and all that was great, I decided to go with me instead, right? So I want you to leave with that. Always pick you, ask questions. What if they say, no, we just will answer it on email? Like, no, I need the camera on, and I need for us to if it's a Zoom call, make sure the camera's on. You need to watch body language. You need to see what's going on. You need to then be able to make a decision for whether it will appreciate you in an inclusive environment or not. So thanks, everybody. This is the book that I wrote for the research that I have. It's from ALA. It's just it's a handbook on how to create more better and healthier work organizations. If you don't have it, you can always get it in a library loan. But if you do get it, that's great. ALA thanks you for that. And like I said, if you have any questions or concerns or anything like that, feel free as always to reach out to me. And it's always a great hair day. It's a great hair day. So have a great day. Thanks.
Thank you, Elaina, for a wonderful kickstart to what I hope to be is more conversations that will pick up from where you left us. Because I think if nothing else, we know that it's everybody's responsibility to make that environment welcoming and inclusive. Before you head off, were there questions in the Q&A for Elaina?
Yes, Wanda, there are a couple. Let me ask the first question from James. Did the library after this assimilation example start losing attendance again or anything negative, or did they still benefit from his contribution?
No, it went back before. It just went back. They lost the people. People weren't interested. So he told me that they just met at the community center. So yes, no, the people were not interested in the traditional model.
Great. And the second question is, are there any resources or how-tos on how to do control release effectively?
Okay, whoever said that, send me an email. I have a book for you. I don't remember it off the top of my head, but send me an email and I'll find it for you.
That's a Maha Kumaran. So thanks, Maha. Okay, another question. How do people of color who are in leadership positions manage the emotional labor and expectations to solve all of the lack of minority representation within librarianship?
I would say here that that's what I meant by ultimately, when you look at inclusive, that it also means all, right? And the reason why I say it's a lot more complex and the reason why it's a lot more elusive, right? It's because it's not just the, like, oh, we're going to, make sure everybody feels welcome. It's the structure and the culture of the organization. It is the whether we're offering recognition and praise, whether we are providing opportunities for people to thrive. It's a variety of different things. And the number one thing I always say is it's not just the leader, sort of like Wanda in her library. It's the people who she has supporting her that all have the same vision of where she's at and how she wants her staff to feel in the library. Everybody has to be in alignment. So what I always find is when I do my work is that the director might be great, but then people in the middle manager are all over the place. Some people are having good experiences, some people are not, or whatever. So I think that, just getting back to what your question is, that we have to really work on our organization. What I said before, it has to be intentional, and it has to be not just the person at top doing all of the labor, but it has to be that we're all in alignment. One of the things that I feel very strongly about is that we need more training in terms of leadership visioning, not just strategic planning, but leadership strategic planning, and how we can make sure that everybody is getting a similar experience in terms of people first, employees first, and how we can make sure we get paid extra money, we got paid more money to make sure our staff are, being the best versions of themselves at work. That's why we get paid the more money. That's why we are at those leadership positions. But it's not one person doing it all themselves at all. It is making sure that the continuity goes throughout the organization. And it's not easy work. I'm no way giving the impression it's like this. It is intentional work, and you have to put effort into it in order to get the results. It really is. You got to do the work.
Wonderful, Elaina. That's amazing. So somebody could drop the link to her book in the chat. That would be fantastic. Are there any other questions for Elaina? I know she has another meeting she has to get to.
Thank you so much, guys. I'm so glad that you guys stopped by. And like I said, always feel free to reach out if you have any other questions. Thank you, Wanda, for inviting me. And I hope you guys have a great rest of the program.
And Elaina, I just wanted to compliment you on your use of Poll Everywhere. Talk about equity, diversity, and inclusion, including us in your presentation. That was quite inspiring, and I'm going to have to borrow from that in the future. Great job. Nice to meet you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Elaina. Enjoy your afternoon. Thank you.
Thanks.
I want to thank Elaina because so much of what we wanted to cover today was the fact that as a library school student, in case you are that, or a recent graduate, or someone who's been in the profession for a long time, I think we all need to understand that it's all of our responsibility to make sure that our profession, that our libraries are welcoming and inclusive. And so therefore, we have this wonderful panel that's going to come together and talk to us. But I think, are we taking a break, Anthony, first, or we're going to go straight into the panel?
Whatever you think, Wanda. I think we might be okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right then. So the panelists have been asked to talk specifically about what they have done to ensure that their places or their professional, whatever they choose, whatever angle they choose. But what have you done to make sure that it is inclusive and welcoming? And I think first up is Michael Crumpton. And as I said earlier, I'll ask each presenter to introduce themselves a little further to the group. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Hope you're doing well. Someone said something about snow flurries in Los Angeles this morning, and I haven't had a chance to see if that's true, but hopefully it doesn't come up your way. So I'm Mike Crumpton. I'm at the University of North Carolina in Greensboro. I'm the Dean of the Libraries now. Been here 15 years, and I'm also an affiliated faculty member in the Library and Information Science program, and I've been doing that for over 10 years. And that's important because I'm going to consider myself representing here, because it's not about me, it's about all of us. And we have great collaboration between the libraries and the LAS department, including when Dr. Chow was here. So, and we miss you, Anthony. Are we going to go around? You want me to go ahead and talk a little bit?
You can go ahead and talk.
Okay. So what I wanted to share with you is some of the things that we've done, both as libraries and in collaboration with LAS, because I think it's been significant in moving the needle. And listening to Elaina talk, which we're part of ASERL, so we know her from that point of view too. She made some terrific points and things that we had actually experienced and lived with. And so please take to heart what she's talking about, and her book is really great. And then I used to talk about it takes a village. So, it's not about me. Like I said, I'm representing, but if you watch the Super Bowl this year, that the slogan about it takes all of us came out. Some of the players had that on their helmets. And I just really like that because that's true. It takes all of us. And so some of what I'm going to talk to you about is things for you to look for when you're looking into institutions and out there job hunting, because it's not easy. That's how Elaina kind of ended up about it not being easy. And it's been a lot of change. So we've had a diversity resident program in the library. We're on our 7th resident. So that means we've been doing this about 15, 16 years. And we're very proud of that. We were one of the first ones to initiate that kind of program. It took the vision of the current dean at that time to make it happen. And it took a lot of patience with people trying to understand what this was all about. At the time, this organization, the libraries, had one minority librarian, and now we're closer to 10%. And I know that's still not perfect or right, but it's a progress. And so this is always going to be a work in progress. But the residency program has taught us all a lot. And part of that was instilling into the culture that a diversity resident librarian is first a librarian, a professional. We didn't want them to be treated like a graduate student on the reference desk. You got your degree, you have all the rights and privileges. And there was a lot of organizational culture that needed to kind of wrap itself around that. People kind of have a tendency to default to, oh, I got an extra pair of hands here and stuff like that. And that's not what it's about. The residency program is about, we call it packing 5 years of experience into 2, trying to make sure that resident gets what they need to be successful out in the profession. So that means we needed to have a commitment to diversity within the profession. And so that was kind of the starting point, and having those kind of conversations to get the organization on board. We've had a diversity committee all that time as well. That's done a variety of different things with programs, speakers, surveys, things like that. And so they've been a partner in all of this. From the LIS point of view, about 12 years ago, a group went in and did an IMLS grant for ACE scholars. That's academic and cultural enrichment scholars. And the goal was to improve diversity within the profession. So subsequently, we had a total of 3 cohorts So we graduated approximately 50 people in those 3 cohorts with this IMLS funding that helped support their way through college in order to get diversity into the profession. And that was really critical in the sense that it was a shared responsibility between ILS and the libraries, between partnering libraries, such as Wanda, she was one of them, the mentors to help these young professionals complete their academic coursework and get out into the profession and be successful. So that also took a lot of change. And the other thing that Elaina mentioned was intention. So a lot of this had to have intention behind it to make it successful. And she talked about conflict. I was making notes when she talked about conflict, and yes, that happens. And so you have to have a plan, and I'm talking about in terms of it takes all of us, the village. The village has to have a plan to mitigate conflict because it's going to happen. And it might be something small, it's misunderstanding or personalities, but it also could expand into the big picture of how someone actually feels about the profession and where they're headed and stuff like that, kind of like the business librarian example that she was using. The other thing we did that I wanted to mention that's kind of significant here is, once again, a collaboration between the libraries and the LIS department was a program we call Real Learning Connections. And this wasn't geared specifically for diversity, although it had a lot of diverse elements in it, but it was the learning culture that is the value there. And what we were doing was developing projects in the library that grad students could apply for. And the library school would have a faculty sponsor. And the goal there was financially, the library school provided the tuition waiver and the library provided a stipend for substance. But you had a librarian, project head, and then you had the student, and then you had the faculty member. So it was a 3-way learning opportunity. And we tried to infuse that learning mentality into the rest of the organization so that people understood that it's not just about them. It's not just about, if you have a student doing an internship or a practicum or something like that, it's not just about the extra pair of hands. You learn something from everyone you meet at whatever level they're at. And so we've learned as a organizational culture to learn from the folks that we're working with. The students, like I said, in those practicum or internship environments, project environments, the residents who are now new professionals with us, they come with experiences and perceptions that the rest of us don't have. So we've had to learn to get through the clutter in order to understand who they are and what they're about and what they have to offer. Now, I tell you all that to help you kind of formulate your own questioning when you're out there interviewing or looking at organizations. A lot has changed in the last few years to the better. With our diversity resident program, we joined the ACRL Diversity Alliance years ago, and now we send our residents to this. The idea behind that was so that a lot of institutions only have 1 or 2. This forms a cohort, which allows the residents to actually interact with people in the same situation they are and compare notes and to learn from that point of view. All this stuff takes support, and that's something to be aware of. So a diversity resident line here in our libraries takes away a line that we would be using for something else. And that doesn't sound like a big deal, but it can be, especially in tough budget times. And that's always been something that we try to make sure we protect, is that diversity resident line. So the investment that's being made in a program like that is first of all, an appropriate question to ask. But second of all, just something to be aware of so that if you are mitigating conflicts, sometimes those conflicts revolve around the use of the resources. But like I said, we have progress. We've gone from 1 person to 7 or 8 now. I didn't count them up exactly, but we are growing in that regard. Our campus is growing. So we are now a minority serving institution. And so it's important for us to represent our students. We are close to becoming a Hispanic serving institution. Same thing. It's important that we look and feel the part to represent our students. So those are the kind of homework things that you can dig into to find out from a campus perspective where they stand. You know, what kind of diversity issues are they pursuing? Things get wrapped around a lot sometimes having a chief diversity officer. And if a campus has that, and I'm sorry I'm focusing on academic, but if a campus has that, that's great. But that's a key point to kind of invite more information and deeper conversations and things like that. Looking at what either an LIS program or the libraries are doing can make a bigger difference, in my opinion. We've got, we take what we do on the road sometimes and present at state conferences or some of the consortia like the ACERL that I was mentioning earlier. So it is about all of us. It's not about just one or two. It's about all of us making a difference in raising the bar of diversity in our profession. And thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. My face is gone. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate your intentionality. And I think that we had two speakers and both of them have given us examples of how intentionality is essential. Our next speaker is going to talk even more about intentional efforts. And so at this time, we're going to have Kelvin Watson come aboard, and he's going to introduce himself and talk about his intentionality. Kelvin?
Hi, good afternoon, Wanda, panel, and everyone that's online. I'm Kelvin Watson. I am the Executive Director for the Las Vegas Clark County Library District. And as previously mentioned by Elaina and Michael, some of the things that I would share with you and, my experiences having served as the past BCLA president. I've been Executive Director for Las Vegas for 2 years. And prior to that, I was at the Broward County Libraries for 4 years in Florida. So some of my recommendations to foster and ensure equity, diversity, and inclusion in our profession is through mentorship. And one of the things that I have been able to participate in is both formal and informal mentoring. BCLA, the Black Caucus of the American Library Association, when I was not a librarian, actually, I was mentored by many BCLA members, including Wanda Brown, who is on this call. Leadership and being intentional, as mentioned again by Elaina and Michael, you can have action statements, but you actually need to really be intentional with measuring the outcomes that you have. And that's something that I've learned as a leader to implement. Do succession planning and recruitment. Those are other intentional aspects. One of the things that I implemented as a leader in Broward County, as well as in that I do at Las Vegas, is I've started for our staff, and really is focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion, is I've implemented a new employee roundtable. So I meet quarterly with staff members who've been with our organization for 3 years or less. It's open to you, optional, but it's an opportunity to sit with me, a diversity candidate who participated in the Spectrum Scholarship Program, the ARL program as well, to recruit diverse candidates. So I'm able to share my personal experiences and allow the staff to hear from me. One of the things that I also want to share with you is I'm a 100 Black Men member of the Las Vegas chapter. And one of the things that they say is what they see is what they'll be. So you have an opportunity to see an African-American male library director who is mentoring all of my staff and being very intentional about everything that I'm doing. So, providing ways to not only locally be inclusive, but also nationally as well. And that's why I was open to participating in this panel discussion And that is to touch every level of librarians to connect and share these experiences. Other things that I would share with you is to, connect with all of the ALA, the diversity affiliates, connect with other BIPOC members. And, you're going to need these opportunities and to share. I know JCLC was just a few weeks ago, and that was a great opportunity for librarians to connect and share experiences. Application of DEIA is certainly key to fostering and ensuring that DEIA, diversity, equity, and inclusion, becomes part of your DNA. You have to challenge yourself. You have to challenge others. And sometimes, as Elaina and Michael pointed out, it's not easy. It is conflict. I can give you many, many stories in my career where I've had an opportunity to be promoted, for example, and had the leadership say that they weren't ready for me. That happened early in my career when I worked for an organization that was affiliated with libraries. I've also been on job interviews as well, where I've had to, and Elaina pointed that out, with her example of, I was asked questions that other non-diverse candidates were not asked. And I've actually turned those jobs down and walked away from those opportunities. So it's really about being committed to diversity, equity, inclusion, not only within yourself, but also sharing it with others. Some of the other things I want to share with you is that we've started a diversity committee within my current library, Las Vegas, really reinvigorating a committee that was already there, standing it up. We're doing surveys, we're doing assessments within our organization so that we know how to move forward. And one of the things that I did when I promoted this committee was sent out a communication to the entire library. And I don't actually have a position that's called Chief Diversity Officer. And one of the reasons is because I serve as the Chief Diversity Officer. So all of the staff that works with me, you are then anointed, I say, to also be focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the last thing that I'll say, as I pass it on, to other panelists and, look forward to your questions, is that, again, one of the things that that I want to reiterate is what they see. So what they see in you, if you're doing this work, they'll also be. Others around you will also be contributing to the success of diversity, equity, and inclusion within your organization as you continue on in your profession in libraries. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelvin. Before you leave, though, can you tell us just one little story about how you've invited the uninvited to your library?
Okay, so thanks, Wanda. That's my ongoing key term that I use as a library director in Broward and also in Las Vegas. So I use this term called inviting the uninvited with not just the staff, but it's really about the community. It's opening up resources and making them available, making people feel welcome. That's an active thing that you can do, right? It's not just about when you put that in place, right? And you share that, and that's something that is, again, part of your DNA. It's a part of the organization's DNA. So if they know that everything that we do for our libraries and our community, for our staff, is about inviting people that don't feel welcome and haven't felt welcome, that's the key. That's the key to success. And I think that's what's made the libraries that I've had the opportunity to work with be successful in our communities through the different programs that we offer. One example I'll give you real quick is that we offer digital access to our community as well as visitors in Las Vegas on 400 buses. That's actively pointing out that everybody can have access, because you'd be surprised how many people ride the bus here in Las Vegas. And that program that we launched in 2021 has now been, that when I looked at the stats the other day, that's 12% of our overall ebook usage are the people who are riding the bus. So that's what I'll share, and look forward to your questions again. Thanks, Wanda.
Thank you, Kelvin. Thank you very much. We'll move next to Dominique. Let's Dominique come and share with us and introduce yourself. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I am Dominique Dozier. I'm a student success librarian at Santa Clara University. I support first generation, and transfer students in our critical thinking and writing courses. And I am also the subject librarian to women and gender studies and ethnic studies. So I'll be sharing my perspective. I was a recent graduate of San Jose State's iSchool program in 2021. So my perspective stems from what I've learned in graduate school, as well as what I'm currently seeing right now as an early career professional. So just as Kelvin mentioned, utilizing those relationships that you could establish with cultural organizations, for those that are current students right now, especially students, BIPOC students, you want to be able to see how to find this information from your school and if they're communicating it to you, right? So when we think about diversity, equity, inclusion, is this currently happening in your program? So I can remember a story of, it was my second semester in the program, and I was just learning as much as I could. I was taking these courses. I was learning all about the ALA, and I happened to see an email from one of the past presidents of BCALA. Could have been Kelvin. And they were having an information session, right? And they were inviting all Black students to come and sit in on the Zoom. And so for me, that email that the iSchool program shared with me was impactful. So for some of the leaders and, the directors in these libraries, make sure that you are sharing that information with students. With people in your program, right? Because if it's available to you and you know that you can connect possibly with someone within your culture and hear about their experiences and wisdoms, the same that I've listened to with Dr. Brasley and Miss Binnie Wilkins, it's very important. And from that, I was able to become an active member in the BCALA, which stemmed into me learning more about the California Librarians Black Caucus, which is, a great addition to the networking capabilities. And then also making sure that not only when you are receiving the information from the program, is also to make sure that you are being active and communicating with the organizations, right? So that's also very important. And then next, like Elaina mentioned earlier, applying to the positions, coming out of graduate school, I know that we're all very excited, to have those applications, and, the interviews are coming, and we're looking at our responsibilities and our duties and the salary requirements. Those are great, but just remember to look past the application. And remember the things that you've learned in your graduate program, right? What are the strategic plans of the school, right? What are some of the things that they're doing? What is their mission? So it's always important to take that in account when you're looking at whether those the jobs that you're interested in are supporting equity, diversity, and inclusion. And when you're doing so, you're able to see how you see yourself in the position. So for me personally, when I was applying, and it's challenging to apply for those of you that are in the process, I was looking at the strategic plans, right? And then I discovered Santa Clara, and I discovered that they wanted to be this social justice library. And I looked at the things that they were currently doing, right? And the things that they were proposing. And I wanted to be a part of that, because you have to imagine yourself as this person that's going to be in this position, and how are you going to actualize it, right? How are you going to be a part of this social justice library? And so for me, as an instruction librarian in this position, I continue to immerse myself in like the trends. What are people currently discussing? What are the articles talking about? Joining webinars like this one. It's all a way for continuous learning, and it helps with professional development. I recently completed a micro-credential with AQ, the Associated College of Educators, and that was so impactful. The course taught us how to use evidence-based practices to influence, to engage and students, right? And so one of the things that I learned that as I'm joining this social justice library and seeing myself in this position is, how can I use these tools to improve and enhance my instruction sessions with students? And so one of the practices that I developed and I continuously use, and I can see how it creates this welcoming and inclusive environment with students, is inclusive language, right? And I know a lot of us, we state our name, Dominique Dozier, she, her, and things of that sort. And so it's also looking beyond that. And I think that that's something that you can carry with you. How are you expressing confidence, with your students? How are you creating this welcoming, inclusive environment for all? Are your instruction plans accessible? All of those things are helping to advance the efforts of whether something is diverse and inclusive to all, right? And then one of the things that our library also, we recently developed, which is really exciting, is a community of practice. And this community of practice is open to everyone in the library that is interested in instruction and teaching. And it's us coming together to look at some of the tools like our peer review of teaching and how can we change that to support our students in ways that we're just not basing what we are doing in the classroom on certain metrics. Is our classroom welcoming? Is our classroom inviting? Are students encouraged to learn? All of those things, right? So when you're looking for these positions and you're trying to decide whether this is something that you're interested in, look at the mission of the library and act and see yourself in that position and know that it's not a one size fits all. This is a learning process. This is why we're all here sharing. Conversations and dialogue can be very challenging around what you in your mind internalize as diversity and inclusion, but be willing to have those conversations and build those community of practices with your peers in the library if you're able to. And just know that by all of us doing this work, we will continue to make changes in librarianship. And I think that that's the most important thing to get out of anything that I've said, is that when we are doing the work, we are making this feel inclusive for us all. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Dominique. I love your energy and your passion because I feel it when you speak. And I thank you for sharing that with us today. Okay, our next presenter is Miss Binnie Wilkin.
Thank you. I'm the elder in the bunch. Been around librarianship for a lot of years. So I bring a historical perspective to our conversation this morning, as well as a current perspective on how we can be more diverse and inclusive. I have had experience in working in library outreach when it was federally funded and there was money to really get out there and work in communities. I was the Minority Services Coordinator for the Los Angeles County Library, organizing programming and outreach with 91 different libraries in LA County. So I've had a breadth of experience. I've also lectured in library schools and been a professional storyteller. I had written out my notes, typed them up, and it's surprising how so many of the comments that I intended to make coincide with what has been said before. In the interest of time, I'm going to read parts of this document so that we can get to the question and answer discussion. What I wanted to say was that people coming out of library school today, library and information professionals in 2023, are entering a world of complexity, especially as it applies to the subjects of diversity, equity, and inclusion. The American Library Association has advanced from an organization which held conferences in facilities where African Americans were not welcome to an entity now which advocates diversity, equity, and inclusion. Despite this progress, many critical issues remain unsolved and require continued actions and lasting resolutions. Currently, minorities seek roads to advancement within a profession where their representation is approximately 10%. Not enough. Censorship challenges directed towards schools and libraries to exclude books and visuals by and about marginalized communities are increasing. When you think of these large matters, how does a person begin in this profession? And I wanted to zero in on a few practical suggestions. Some of them overlap with what has been said before, but they need to be repeated. One of the things that the speaker talked about was studying your job description to determine whether the work demands include elements of your interests and your passion. Remember, work takes up approximately half of our lives. And we need to have within that work process some opportunities to zero in on our own goals and passions. Within the context of the job and the demands of the job, the descriptions of the job, remember to set your own personal goals. Someone has mentioned before, and I think Kelvin and others agreed, that there's power to gain by connecting with and participating in professional organizations. The ethnic caucuses of cultural groups can provide immeasurable support. Now, the issues facing each group will differ, but many will be general, such as just censorship. Our speaker also asked of us something that is very important, and that is try before you take a position to learn about the culture of the organization for which you may be working. How many minorities are in key positions? How does the library present itself to the community? Visit the site and observe the ambient energy of daily proceedings. And I wanted to add one very important thing, and that is if you can get a copy of the budget. The budget, more than any document and anything you can view, gives you an idea of the commitments of the organization that with which you plan to join. And if you can possibly do it, take a look at it. You'll see where the main money goes, and you'll see where minorities are tacked on at the end of the budget in questionable and tenable positions that are may or may not be funded. On a new job, you have some responsibilities as well, and that is to introduce yourself to the staff. They're going to be looking at you, particularly if you're a minority, with questioning eyes. And don't forget the non-professionals. Be equally congenial at all levels, because staff support is critical to success. Some of those non-professionals may even be your entry into a community, a marginalized community, which you wish to access. Now, one of the mistakes that new librarians make is when they enter an organization, they do not make proper contact with the on-site professionals. These people are not your enemy, but they do not wish to have someone come in and know it all. These people also have insights into the organization that you need. So measure your approaches carefully to the staff on site and recognize their expertise. There may be times down the road when there will be competition, but it should not surface during your early entry into the profession. Minority professionals can bolster knowledge about barriers to overcoming the barriers that they will face as they enter the profession by reading some of the materials that have been written by minority professionals. There's E.J. Josie's whole series that was written by Black librarians. Those issues still exist. And there are a lot of insights given by those people who talk about their experiences breaking into the profession and trying to find their way in a profession in which they were marginalized. If you are unfamiliar, start learning about and connecting with the community. That has already been mentioned. A simple drive around or walk around the site where you may be working will reveal a lot of information. And I agree with the speaker. Stop in someplace, have coffee, and chat with the workers on site, and you'll learn a lot about the community and a lot about the attitudes about the place where you may be working. You'll make more formal contacts with political representatives, cultural organizations, ethnic museums, galleries, and more, but that will come later. Now, regarding equity, the larger question for the day, huge issues loom. What does library outreach mean in 2023? The infusion of artificial intelligence is already present. Yet, we still have large populations still in poverty, literally hungry, and starving for information needed to survive. The cyber tools of artificial intelligence are invading the world of information faster than most experts imagined. A few years ago, speaking at the American Library Association, I noted what a futurist had said about libraries, that eventually they would be walls where images could be projected and a person like Winston Churchill would answer all queries about himself. Well, that technology is already active. Enough information about people and places has been gathered sub rosa so that holograms can eerily duplicate a person and be projected, placing them virtually in any setting. Also, in recent weeks, the AI wars to replace search engines such as Yahoo and Google have advanced. Will these developments contribute to the expansion or demise of libraries? Who will control or monitor the AI sources for accuracy and fairness? Is ALA developing strategies and policies to respond? And how does this affect information access? Will people and places already in the margins become invisible? I want to tell you a story about one place where I worked, and they had problems with the homeless people and others living on the fringes of society. I arrived for a meeting and rode up on the elevator and found that there was quite a turmoil going on. There were people gathered all around and they were clapping and cheering. And when I moved into the crowd so that I could see what was going on, in the middle of this circle was one of the library regulars whom the guards knew, and he was putting his dancing dog through his exercises and performance. Roll over, Rover, jump, Rover. And the crowd would clap, clap, clap. But there was no dog. The dog was invisible. It was indeed a virtual dog. The serious question becomes, will libraries continue to exist for the public good, keeping facts about human existence from becoming invisible? Or will artificial intelligence and the age of robotics transpose humans into dancing dogs, commanded by corporate greed? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Binnie. I hope not, but I'm sure that day is coming. I hope it won't completely replace us. Maybe I'll be out there with it, out there on that. Thank you so much. We'll see. Okay, Ms. Stephanie, bring us up.
Thank you, Wanda. And good morning, everyone. My name is Stephanie Brasley, and I am the Dean of the University Library at California State University, Dominguez Hills. And I am delighted to participate and to contribute to these important themes. I appreciate all the comments that our previous speakers have said, and also to Binnie for setting an historical backdrop for the current DEI or EDI work that is going on. And I'm going to be adding to the list that has already been talked about of things that professionals can do. But I would like to focus my comments on avenues that foster and ensure DEI and that new library and information professionals will need to thrive. I'm approaching this in two ways, from a collective and an individual perspective. So first, I want to discuss some essential approaches taken by academic libraries collectively to advance and support diversity, equity, and inclusion, and then touch on some of the newer, innovative efforts being undertaken by libraries to engender equity and inclusion. And then secondly, I would like to speak to what new information professionals might consider individually as they strive to understand the culture around diversity, equity, and inclusion in their new positions, and then how they can prepare themselves to thrive in the situations that they encounter. I do want to acknowledge up front that I have as many questions as I do suggestions for making a successful entry into the profession. But first, let me speak collectively about some of the traditional activities that academic libraries and others have undertaken concerning diversity, equity, and inclusion. And for brevity, I'm just going to say DEI. But this work has traditionally, over the past 2.5 decades, centered around recruitment efforts that have included programs for professional support staff to encourage those working in libraries to pursue the degree, and also post-MILIS academic library residency programs, which Michael covered very well. Because many managers and libraries focus on numbers, there's been much less emphasis on retention, which is inextricably aligned with inclusion and equity. And that's why I was so happy to hear Elaina's excellent remarks on inclusion earlier in our program today. At some libraries, work has been done to make recruitment ads more welcoming and to expand where they place their position announcements. When I was at UCLA, we had a task force that focused on changing language to be more generic, haven't had my coffee this morning, so that people with transferable skills would be eligible to apply. Also, mentoring programs, as I believe it was Kelvin who mentioned those, for early career librarians and professional support staff have been one way of promoting DEI. In terms of library instruction and information literacy, the traditional efforts emphasized more inclusion of different groups, perspectives, and lived experiences when teaching information literacy concepts. So, for example, when teaching some of the ACRL information literacy standards, which later evolved into the greatly improved information literacy framework, librarians would be sensitive to using examples from different groups or identities, whether they be racial, ethnic, gender-oriented, or LGBTQ members, in order to highlight diversity. Also, there were some good things done with respect to cataloging, classification, and archives and special collections. So in terms of cataloging, Sanford Berman was a trailblazer in promoting alternative viewpoints in librarianship, particularly as a critic of biased headings in the LC subject headings, the Library of Congress subject headings. In the early 21st century, there weren't huge waves of changes in terms of how archivists approached the lens through which they determine items of importance in collections, particularly when they were looking at collections of people of color. The teachings in LIS programs were centered around Western knowledge and ways of knowing. However, in recent years, there have been exciting and impactful changes in the LIS field that have been influenced by DEI. And I have really been revitalized by the body of literature that has emerged in LIS that shines a critical lens on the way that libraries and information professionals approach this work. So this is really an exciting time. So I'd like to mention a few of these transformational, and as Wanda and Kelvin were also speaking to, intentional approaches to try to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion in our libraries. So with respect to recruitment and hiring, there have been some great new ideas to promote hiring that focus on high empathy, inclusive approaches. This semester, my library team is reading a case study from Grand Valley University's library called A Journey to Hiring with Heart in the edited work, Implementing Excellence in Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, a handbook for academic libraries that was published last year. They have some great ideas that include reframing job description language to avoid implicit bias. They also practiced empathy with transparency and communication about their hiring process. There have been several suggestions about reviewing and unpacking job descriptions, job announcements, and some of the recommendations that we hope to implement in our library are notifying unqualified candidates as soon as possible instead of waiting until the very end of this process. Sometimes academic librarian positions can take anywhere from 2 to 5 months. And so waiting until the end increases people's anxiety. So by telling them very soon in the process, it increases respect for the applicant's time. Also, sending messages to the remaining pool of candidates in a timely fashion to let them know that they are remaining in the pool and to look for next steps. During the interview process, we're going to try to provide more information about the process itself and the people involved. So at Grand Valley, they provided candidates the names and a brief bio of committee members, and they had an invitation from the chair to reach out if they had more questions, and a list of the library's core workplace principles. There is also expanding your reach in terms of promoting, like on Twitter, and attending conferences that focus on BIPOC librarians. In California, we have good weather, but it is an expensive place to live. So I saw something that UNLV had done, which was making a LibGuide that addressed issues around cost of living and some affinity organizations, and a guide to Las Vegas and places to go. So we're going to try to do something about that as well. In margins of oh no, I don't want to mention that book yet. The other thing that has been very good in recent years is this elevation of the narrative of people of color's lived experiences. So the marginalized voices and lived experiences of LIS professionals of color have been elevated extensively in recent webinars, podcasts, articles, and books. For example, the Pushing the Margins, Women of Color and Intersectionality in LIS, that is edited by Rose Chu and Annie Fo, has a wealth of narratives about experiences of women of color in LIS, and it's grounded in critical race theory, Black feminism, and intersectionality studies. Also, Maria Arcardi's edited work that's entitled The Feminist Reference Desk and Feminist Pedagogy for Library Instruction also utilizes feminist pedagogy theory that interrogates the hierarchical structures and helps us to look at BIPOC experiences when working both at the reference desk and also engaging in instruction. Another great, I think, transformative and galvanizing movement for diversity, equity, and inclusion in recent LIS history has been the focus on critical theory, as seen in work on critical librarianship, critical library pedagogy, and feminist pedagogy. So in the introduction to critical library pedagogy, an edited work by, I don't remember, Pogowski and McElroy. James Elmborg, who is a seminal author on many things in library and information science and also information literacy, he provides a brief background in that work of critical theory, saying that in essence, this critical library pedagogy and critical theory was born in the social sciences as an alternative to empiricism and analytical approaches to knowledge production. And critical library pedagogy for libraries is part of this whole evolution of how we look at information literacy. I'm excited about this next step in the maturation of information literacy, because as a former information literacy coordinator, I am glad to see the growth behind critical library pedagogy, I keep saying that interchangeably, because it reframes instruction in terms of looking at ways to dismantle oppression and hierarchies and to distribute power in the classroom. For me, it extends the notion of the value of constructivism, placing librarian instructors not only as facilitators or guides, but also as proactive interrogators of the traditional ways that we have taught and planned instruction. So there are a lot of books now that help us to digest and understand how to do this. Another theory discussed in the literature is feminist pedagogy. Again, Maria Accardi's edited work entitled The Feminist Reference Desk and Feminist Pedagogy for Library Instruction utilizes feminist pedagogy theory that interrogates the hierarchical structures to look at BIPOC experiences when working both at the reference desk, that's one book, and then also engaging instruction. Critical librarianship is another concept that addresses equity and inclusion by shining a critical light on the roles that libraries and information professionals play in supporting and maintaining systems of oppression, either consciously or unconsciously. So for those of you who are passionate about pursuing a position that enables you to teach, this is very exciting. I recommend some of the writings of Gretchen Keer, Keer, concerning critical pedagogy and information literacy. Critical archival studies and have also taken a major step forward in benefiting from these critical theories, especially when you look at community archives work. There have been intentional and proactive efforts to reframe the way that archivists decide which is valuable. What they're doing now is there is a lot more collaboration and communication with the groups of color that these collections are intended. And so that helps in providing more understanding about a group's culture. And then finally, in terms of library collection services and practices, another great thing that is being done, and which we did at our library, and Kelvin also mentioned, are DEI audits. Some add A for accessibility or J for justice, but these are positive steps in critically reviewing collection services, staff, and policies. We had Dr. Kawana Bright at East Carolina University's Library and Information Science program could conduct our audit, and it has been really fabulous. And we're working on her roadmap. So now I want to very quickly switch gears and talk a few moments about the importance of culture, self-care, cultural taxation, agency, and self-advocacy. So as a new professional, I offer these items for your consideration as you embark on a job as a new professional. First is culture. There is a saying that culture trumps strategy, and that change proceeds at the speed of trust. So I suggest that you take some time to do an environmental assessment of your culture, of the library, the subcultures, find out who the gatekeepers and influencers are as you embark on your new position. And also aligned with culture is the idea of self-advocacy and seeing where in the organization there are opportunities for you to exercise agency to enable you to have both additional power and resources to help you fulfill your professional goals. And then after you have a sense of culture, you can discern opportunities to contribute in those areas. White librarians can also continue this work with allyship and with continuing efforts to understand and contribute to dismantling racism. When taking on a new position, you want to do your best and you're motivated to learn. But this is where self-care and recognition of cultural taxation comes in. I would caution self-care, setting some minimal boundaries, and prioritizing what you do to avoid burnout. Cultural taxation is another area for people of color. As people with cultural knowledge, others can often feel like they can call on you whenever there is something dealing with these DEI issues. And you want to be helpful, but you need to also know your priorities. Some academic libraries have librarians as faculty, and you have to go through the reappointment, tenure, and promotion process. And you want to be successful in that. But if your time and energy is distracted from all these other things, that can be a problem. Also, some of you might have heard of Fobazi Itar's coining of vocational awe and her writings on that. So you don't want to get into some of these traps that LIS professionals of color can run into if these things aren't considered. Imposter syndrome and deficit mindsets. I encourage you to be careful of that. You know, imposter syndrome just basically refers to people, and often this happens more to women and women of color, where you doubt your accomplishments, you have feelings of self-doubt and personal incompetence despite your education, your experience, and all of your accomplishments. So, you know, sometimes it might make you feel like you're compelled to work harder and to meet impossibly high standards that you set for yourself. So yesterday I attended a good webinar on imposter syndrome. If you feel like this is becoming you, you should look into some of the writings on that. And be a change agent. Not everybody needs to be a change agent, but if you are one that considers your environment and you want to see change, there's always leading at the grassroots level. You know, they talk about leading from the middle, but it's not always having to be in a position where you are leading. And then finally, I would say, continue learning. As Dominique mentioned, it is important to keep abreast of trends. And as I said, there are so many books and articles and webinars. I've attended some of the webinars that Elaina at the ASERL have produced, and that continual learning keeps you fresh and keeps you motivated. Thanks.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you for ending on that note about attending webinars, because we really want to thank everyone who joined us today. And I thank each and every one of your presenters for shedding what I would consider to be instrumental steps to move our students, our recent graduates, our new to the profession, all of us forward. Do we have some questions? We have just a couple of minutes, but do we have time for some questions?
Certainly. Let's see. Well, we also have a job opportunity from Shoshana. So Shoshana, if you want to put that in the, or Alfredo, if you could put that in the chat, that's great. Did have a question about Miss Brasley's book list. So if we will be posting this in the iLibrary as well. So, but Stephanie, I think if you could include some of your titles, that would be great. There's another question about the feminist pedagogy book. The title, if maybe you can drop that in the chat as well. And there is a question for Kelvin, but I think Kelvin had to go to another meeting regarding quarterly new employee roundtables. Question from Sylvia is, do you share the conversation notes, outcomes, topics with the rest of the library, or perhaps just keep them to your to just the attendees? And I don't know if anyone can speak to maybe something like that. Wanda, panel, thoughts on that?
About whether you would keep the notes to yourself or share them out?
Exactly.
I guess I would share them out unless they ask that we keep this in confidence. I probably would share it out. I think if you start where you start out sharing the minutes of the sessions, it'll do one or two things. It'll make more people want to come and be a part of the conversation, or it will shut it down. So like if something is said they don't want. So establishing all those ground rules up front should do it. But I think that's a question we want to ask Kelvin about, whether he shares it or does it not. Because it was for people who have been to the organization in the last 1 to 3 years.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. New employees. Mm-hmm.
So that could be interesting. That's an interesting approach.
Good question. Binnie, did you want to provide any summation? And I know we were kind of going back and forth as far as who would summarize, but I don't know, Binnie, if you have any final thoughts for us, and then.
Okay. I'll be happy to reflect on what's been said today. I don't know about Kevin's new program but it sounds very interesting. I think if I agree with Wanda that if it were my program, I would share it, because some of the employees who've been around for a long time may have been holding some of those same issues, in their minds and hearts, and would be interested in finding resolution to it. So if it were my program, but I'm not familiar enough with it. And I want to say that as an elder and a hip shaking storyteller, former librarian and library school lecturer, I'm really proud to be part of this. And I'm proud of our speakers and the wealth of information that they've provided for us. It's been a very, very interesting and successful morning. Elaina led us out by giving us the guidelines for an inclusive workplace and understanding what that means. And Michael gave us some information about a long-term program and emphasized that if you're going to have a commitment to diversity, you have to think about it on a long-term basis, and you have to make a big commitment to it. Kelvin talked about mentorship, which is extremely important, and I think I re-emphasized that you should talk to your your compatriots, not only the ones who are part of your culture, but those who sympathize with you as well from other cultures, because there's learning from other culture experiences. Dominique was really pleading with us to share information with students, to prepare them, to get them ready to face some of the issues that are going to be facing them when they get out into the community, and helping them to understand what a commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion really means. I interjected some questions about where we're going to go in the future, along with a little bit of information about the past. It's too bad that we're bringing into 2023 a lot of those residual prejudices and racial biases that existed in the past. And in my own experience, I think we also have to consider that we are ambassadors for our ethnic group. I've always considered myself an ambassador for Africanness. Whatever your ethnic group is or your passion is, consider yourself an ambassador for that. And Stephanie just gave us so much information about where we can find written instructions for moving ahead to help the profession progress toward more diversity and equity and inclusion. And my final statement is the next steps will require professionals on all levels, including library education and organized activities addressing services, to step up and become part of the fray. Be active, participate in processes which help push the profession forward toward more diversity and our inclusion. Remember what marginalized means. Marginalized means living, existing, and surviving in the margins of the story. Power lies with those who control the narrative. The goal of diversity, equity, and inclusion is to bring information and accomplishments of those who have existed in the margins into the main narrative, and making them an essential part of the action. The progress of humanity is at stake. And thank you again so much for including me.
Thank you so much, Binnie. That was a wonderful summation. Wanda, did you have any final thoughts? And then I've got a few parting.
I think she wrapped it up very nicely, put a bow on it very well. Thank you so much. I just want to say thank you. And I did ask participants at the beginning to take notes and decide what area you were going to go forth in. I hope you've done that. I hope you've got some pointers to take you forward. Anthony, thanks for having us all here today.
Yep. Absolutely, Wanda. And I just want to thank, let's give the panel a loud round of applause, I guess, emoticons or whatever you want to do. Thank you for your time. I'm always humbled by the collective wisdom, expertise, and excellence of our speakers. So thank you so much. I also want to thank our co-sponsor of the event, the California Librarians Black Caucus. We are going to drop their membership link there. So Fred, if you could do that for me, I appreciate it. So feel free to support CLBC and also join their organization. I also want to thank our hardworking and dedicated staff. So Vivian Zuo, our events coordinator, Alfredo Alcantara, our Canvas administrator and Zoom guru, Yori Tokunaga, our EDI student writer, Steve Hargadin with Library 2.0, and Nicole Purviance, our director of marketing, for all of the work that they did to make this a success. And this is an example of my and our commitment to EDI. something that UNCG Chancellor Gilliam told me a long time ago when I posed a question to him as faculty senate chair. What can I do? What can we do as a faculty to best support EDI? And he said, just do something, Anthony. Do something to help. It's an important message for us all. And Michael, I'm sorry if you've left already, but I want to thank you for your kind comments. And I miss all of you guys in North Carolina and UNCG very much. Finally, our full transcript and recording of and summary of today will be in our new EDI iLibrary, and Alfredo is going to drop that in the chat as well. And also, please subscribe to our EDI YouTube channel because we have a lot of wonderful things coming up. So we have Women in Information coming up in March to celebrate Women's Heritage Month. We also have Deaf Culture and Community, and also Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander symposiums coming up in April. Also join Binnie for our celebration of Juneteenth Day over the summer. She will be back to enthrall us with her stories and her wisdom. And then a final note, in order to support EDI, as we have said many times today, please allocate time and resources at doing the hard work to make it a reality in your respective environments. It is not easy at all, but well worth the effort to attain a higher level of being together for us all. Anyway, thanks again for joining us. Again, all of this will be posted online, including the slide decks. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye.
Wanda. Thanks, everybody.